If you've been watching the series, like I'm sure most of you have, then you probably are pretty familiar with the show's lovable narrator, Uatu, the Watcher. And there's just so much to love about the character, especially if you're a longtime Marvel fanboy, then you've been waiting to see the Watchers pop up in the MCU for a while. You know, not as a lighthearted gag in a James Gunn flick, but actual real-deal Watchers. And that's exactly how What If's Watcher comes across. He's just like the Watcher from the original Fantastic Four comics in the 60s. He's the old, wise, ancient spirit of the universe who must remain a neutral observant of all that comes to pass. Although he'll probably end up interfering a ton just like Uatu does the minute that he shows up. But there's actually one big question we can't answer about Uatu the Watcher in What If. How does he fit in with the Watchers from the James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy 2? If you remember during that film, the Guardians were jumping from sector to sector, and during one of their jumps, they hopped over a planetoid where Stan Lee and a group of 3 Watchers were chatting about current events. This was the first time that the MCU had acknowledged that Stan Lee was anything more than a fun cameo, so it's pretty significant. James Gunn actually cast him as a Watcher informant, essentially retconning all of his previous appearances in all of the Marvel movies, whether MCU, Fox, or Sony, as missions for the Watchers. So how exactly do these Watchers, who have been established in the MCU for over 4 years, relate to Uatu from What If? We're not really sure, at least not yet. In the days and weeks to come, we'll find out more about Uatu and exactly how he fits in with the other cosmic entities in the universe. But for right now, we'll have to work with the information we have. When we think about the Watchers from Guardians of the Galaxy, we don't really know what those Watchers did. Were they assigned to specific physical regions of space in the sacred timeline? Or were they tasked with observing all the splinter timelines as well? I'd initially want to say, no, they're not multidimensional Watchers. Their physical presence on the planetoid, chatting with Stan Lee, who was their informant, seemed a bit pedestrian for a multidimensional being. But then again, we already discussed how James Gunn retconned all of Stan Lee's cameos so that he was originally the informant of the Watchers instead of just a fun little Easter egg for fans to look forwards to. If we want to ride Gunn's decision to the absolute limits of reason, then, like I guessed earlier, we could claim that all of Lee's appearances in the Fox and Sony movies were also in service to the Watcher. Which means that Stan Lee is a multidimensional character, and if he's multidimensional, then the people who serve must be interested in keeping tabs on the multiverse as well. In that way, the Watchers from Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and Uatu from What If might actually fit perfectly in the canon without any need to explain why they look or act differently. Although, it's pretty interesting that the multiverse is so important to the Watchers of the MCU. In the comics, they're tasked with mostly just observing their assigned sector of the main 616 universe. Uatu is just one of the weirder ones who enjoys checking out alternate realities, as well as his own.